on opportunities available in Malaysia for Canberra businesses, including practical knowledge on how to enter the market, trade regulations and business culture in Malaysia. If you don't know me, my name is Greg Harford. I'm the Chief Executive of the Canberra Business Chamber, and this webinar is being produced with the support of the ACT Government's Office of International Engagement. We've got a great panel joining us today for the discussion, and I'd like to introduce to you Mr. Abu Hazan Mustafa from the High Commission of Malaysia. We've also got Ms. Ilis Amira Sulaiman, the First Secretary of the High Commission of Malaysia, Mr. Abdul Latif Nordin, who's the Assistant Trade Commissioner for the Malaysian Trade Development Commission, Mr. Kushwant Danoa, who will be known to many of you as a cross-border business strategist connecting Canberra and Malaysia. He's a lawyer with 20 plus years experience. He leads corporate and commercial law at Khairuddin Yaman Tan in Malaysia, but is also the president of the Australia-Malaysia Business Council. He runs Truefit Hill in Canberra and advises leading businesses such as Your GP. So he's got a real interest in helping Australian businesses enter ASEAN markets. And then finally, we have Dayalan Asoka, the founder and chief executive officer of Proventus. Dayalan is a quality engineer and a supply chain specialist with 22 years of global experience across multinational startups and growth stage companies. He has an honours degree in electronics engineering from Multimedia University and is a member of Engineers Australia. So ladies and gentlemen, or lady and gentlemen, welcome very much to the podcast. It's great having you here. So our format for today is that we will have a presentation from Abdul, who will give us an overview of Malaysia's economy and key sectors, talk a little bit about current bilateral trade ties, talk about government initiatives and incentives for foreign businesses, and navigating trade regulations and approvals. We'll then hear from Kushwant Danoa, who will give us some insights for Australian businesses looking to export, and we'll hear from Dayalan about some first-hand experiences entering the Malaysian market, and we'll have an opportunity for questions and answers at the end. So please, if you do have questions, please just use your Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. And at this point, I'll hand over to Abdul Latif Nordin, perhaps with the assistance of Abu Hazan Mustafa. And they've got a few slides to go through, and then we'll move on to hear from Kush. So Abdul and Abu, over to you.
Hi, thank you very much, Greg, for this opportunity. I'll just need to share the screen first here.
Yes, that's right, please.
Okay, can you see the screen? Is that okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, just to introduce myself, my name is Abdul Latif Nordin. I'm the Assistant Trade Commissioner of Madrid, Melbourne. I've been here for 2 years. So, of course, under Madrid, actually, what we do is we facilitate merchant exporters who want to expand in markets here. So we just try to connect them with this Australian business entity, so they can have collaboration and trade business together. So for this webinar, I'll just give overview about trade between Malaysia and Australia, but I'll start first with this Malaysia trade. Okay, Malaysia trade performance. I'll talk about Madrid bid and then return to do business in Malaysia and Malaysia product and services capabilities. So Malaysia is strategically located in ASEAN, and as this year we are the chairmanship of ASEAN. So we have 10 member states, population of, I'll briefly explain about ASEAN, 10 member states, 500 million population, and we contribute around 3.6% of world GDP. So this is Malaysia, making up 13 states with a population of 34.1 million. GDP growth constant in 3, and we have GDP growth 3.6 in 2024 with GDP capita around $11,000. So we are the 24th largest trading nation and 25th largest export countries. and also 24th largest in import. So this is how we move from 1970, 1990, and the latest one last year we have a trade of 630 billion USD. So the trade performance in 2024, our top market in exports and imports are ASEAN, but nevertheless, Australia is also our top 10. Then the top exports, E&E products, petroleum products, palm oil, chemicals, machinery and equipment and parts. And then our top import, basically E&E, petroleum products, machinery, chemical, and manufacture of metals. So this is the latest trend in first quarter. We already export almost 100 billion USD, and import 75 billion USD. We always have trade surplus by our record. And then in terms of services, we total trade more than 100 billion last year in 2024. Okay, now we zoom into Malaysia and Australia trade relation. Yeah? So in 2024, let me check. Our total trade with Australia is 18.14 billion USD. Export 10.82 billion, import 7. Australia basically is always, we have always trade surplus with Australia. And our key export are petroleum products, crude, E&E, chemical and machinery. And we import a lot of LNG, metals, and other minings, basically coals. And of course, we depend a lot of an agricultural product from Australia as well, like dairy product, milk. We import wheat, grape, and avocados. And also metal ferrous ores, we import iron ore from Australia. These are by state in 2024. Victoria is the largest top import from Malaysia, New South Wales, and followed by Western Australia. So in terms of services, our major export to Australia, construction, so followed by travel and transport. And then we import our travels, transport, and other business services. So basically, Malaysia, we signed many FTA in Australia. Of course, we have one bilateral with Australia under MAFTA. And then we also have 3 other regional FTA. One is ASEAN, AU, and NZEC. And then we are also together under RCEP and CPTPP. So these are the 4 details for FTA with Australia. And okay, this little thing about brief information about Madrid. We have office here in Melbourne. These are regional office in Malaysia, and we have 37 trade office all around the world. So our core function for export promotion, trade and market information, exporters development. These are some iconic events that we are involved, and we are the organizer of MIHAS, the largest halal event in the world. We're gonna have one in September this year. There are some Malaysia global footprint overseas. Okay, 10 reasons to do business in Malaysia. Because we have a diverse range of high quality products and services, compliance to international standard, good manufacturing practice, transparent, fair, and trading requirement, friendly business environment, excellent track as a trading nation, professional business culture, reliable suppliers, pro-business government policies, and well-developed trade support facilities. And then we have a diverse high value manufacturing base actually from E&E, oil and gas, rubber, some key other sectors such as furniture, plastic, chemical, and medical devices. Also lifestyle products and life science. Okay, these are some upcoming events that that Martrade will be involved in. So we regularly involve in overseas exhibitions, so show and conference. In fact, in Australia, we also bring in some Malaysian exhibitors to participate in, for example, the famous one here, we have fine food. So it's always generate interest for Malaysia, actually to know more about, to expand their market in Australia. So this is actually Martrade Melbourne coverage, not just Australia, but the whole Oceania. So basically, that's all overview about Malaysia trade with Australia. Okay, I'll pass over to you, Greg.
Thank you very much for that overview, Abdul. And at this point, again, if you've got any questions and answers, please just drop them into the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. But at this point, I'd like to invite Kushwant Danoa to come and have a chat to us. He's got a presentation to go through around key considerations for Australian businesses looking to export, barriers, how to build long-term partnerships, and the Australia-Malaysia Business Council's role in facilitating connections. So, Kush, over to you.
Thanks, Greg. Okay, thanks for giving me this opportunity to be part of this panel. I will be speaking from the perspective of being the president of the Australia-Malaysia Business Council, and therefore, what are the concerns that potential Canberra region, not just Canberra-based, but Canberra region businesses might want to consider exporting to Malaysia? To do that, I would like to set a bit of a context first of all. It was mentioned earlier that Malaysia is the chair of ASEAN and for this year, and that actually does have some significance as well. Malaysia's chairmanship team, as I've put up there, well, I haven't put it up there, but Malaysia's chairmanship team for its seat as chair of ASEAN is inclusivity and sustainability. In practical terms, Malaysia is using this team to drive several initiatives, one of which was creating a framework for semiconductor supply chain resilience, expanding digital economic cooperation. That's an area of strength that I think Canberra has and might want to leverage into, and implementing trade facilitation measures that benefit smaller businesses as well. One of the other main areas that Malaysia, as chair of ASEAN this year, is looking into is actually developing the ASEAN Sustainable Investment Guidelines, which they expect to finalize this year, if I'm not mistaken. And that would set the principles and frameworks for promoting responsible and sustainable investments across not just Malaysia, but the region of ASEAN. And again, those are strong suits that I believe Canberra-based, not just Australian-based businesses have a strength in, because this team creates opportunities in green technology and includes things like digital solutions, sustainable supply chain management, and capacity building initiatives that align with these sort of priorities. Moving on to another area that I think is important based on Malaysia's focus as chair is they want to create ASEAN as a central focal point for regional affairs. And that strengthens the ability for Australian businesses to actually take this opportunity through Malaysia to engage with the broader Indo-Pacific region and potentially open doors to multiple markets. And it was mentioned earlier that it's not just Malaysia. it's actually ASEAN that you're actually tapping through Malaysia, and that's 680 plus million ASEAN consumers. And Malaysia is strategically located as the entry point into that broader market. Malaysia has a very well-developed logistics infrastructure, and perhaps something Thailand might touch on later. And Malaysia can therefore, Australian businesses, especially Canberra-based businesses, can actually use this to their advantage, using Malaysia as a regional hub for distribution and operations, not just solely as a single market in itself. And the cumulative GDP of ASEAN is actually huge. It's something like 3.6 trillion US dollars at this point in time. And why specifically would you want to look at Malaysia? Well, look at its growth, projected to be 5.8% GDP for 2025. And then that's a huge amount when you compare to Australia. I think it's targeted to be 1.6 this year, US maybe 1.8. Malaysia's really pushing growth initiatives that line up quite strategically with a lot of things we do in Canberra, things like digital economy, looking at advanced manufacturing and green technology. This sort of growth creates expanded opportunities to actually export these sort of products and services to Malaysia. And I think you also have to bear in mind that Malaysia has demonstrated economic resilience in situations of global uncertainty, which we've seen umpteen times, not too long ago, in particular with regards to the US tariff situation. Another area that we need to take note of is actually the strong trade ties that was touched on just now. The fact that we have a specific free trade agreement, Malaysian-Australian free trade agreement, the MAFTA, as well as the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, both of which creates depth as well as width. And Australia and Malaysia have a long-standing relationship. I remember when I first came to Canberra, there's so many Canberrans that I've talked to that have highlighted the fact that they've been in Malaysia, familiar with Malaysia, and this relationship goes back for over 70 years as far as diplomatic connections are concerned. So when we actually look at export readiness, there's 5 key considerations that you should actually take into consideration. Do market research and validation. You need to actually understand the Malaysian consumer preferences and the regional landscape, whether it's just Malaysia or ASEAN, depending on how you actually want to tackle it. Compliance and documentation, there are differences and nuances. You need to actually navigate the differences in custom requirements. The fact that Malaysia is primarily a majority Muslim country, so halal certification is something that should be considered if you're actually talking about food items and even product standards. Your distribution strategy, you need to choose appropriate channels and partners when engaging in Malaysia. Malaysia does have good infrastructure, but it can differ from your rural and cosmopolitan areas. And your pricing strategy, I'll touch more on that a bit later. And cultural competence, understanding Malaysia's multicultural business environment. Yes, Australia and Canberra in particular is very multicultural, but there are nuances in doing business in Malaysia with that regards. I'll touch on some of the common barriers as well as the solutions around them next. One of the areas of complexity that some exporters to Malaysia might find are the non-tariff barriers. So we talked about the free trade agreements and all of that, but there are some non-tariff barriers as well that might create some complexity. Malaysia has a complex regulatory environment, not very different from Australia, particularly for sectors like food, healthcare, and finance services. So as I mentioned, halal certification might be something that you want to look into. If it's healthcare products, there's certain registrations that you need to look into. local content rules that you need to comply with if you're in certain sectors. For example, if you're in automotive industry, there's a mandated 30 or 45% component local source requirement. Electronic manufacturers need a percentage of parts or assembly within Malaysia to get your preferential treatments. And if you're doing services, you may need local directors or partners to meet certain regulatory requirements as well. There are, of course, cultural and language differences. English is widely spoken in Malaysia. Having said that, nuances in the language can be quite diverse, and use of terms. There are other languages that are spoken there as well: Malay, Chinese, Indian. And the different communities also have slightly nuanced business styles as well. Building relationships is an important part of doing business in Malaysia. And I think that's where Canberrans actually will excel, because doing business, I found in Canberra, is very much relationship built rather than just transactional. And that sort of mindset works very well in Malaysia. One area that may need a bit more emphasis is actually taking into consideration things like communication nuances. That's really important, because Malaysians, even in business, tend to be more high context, in the sense that things are not said quite literally. Sometimes there are non-verbal cues. For example, if someone says, well, we'll consider it, might be difficult to get that done, we'll try our best, that usually indicates some signal of reluctance or potential rejection, where you need to actually look into it a little bit more. What's the next point that I had there? Okay, finding reliable partners. Bearing in mind that you're going into a new country, a new region, I would strongly suggest, and my legal firm back in Malaysia, Karudin Yamantan, or KNT Law for short, we've actually helped quite a number of people actually do due diligences with regards to relationships that they intend to get into. That does not go away. Just doing a search on a website is not sufficient. You need to find out more information on the ground and get a better context of how things work. Because you need to verify their capability and track record beyond their initial claims. You also need to look into market access challenges if you have a specific area. For example, if you intend on going into education in Malaysia, there are local ownership requirements that you may need to look into. If you're doing transport and logistics and you want to set up in Malaysia, there are some Malaysian ownership requirements that you might need to look into, licensing requirements, or all these. You need or should engage someone on the ground in Malaysia to actually look into these issues and find out what you need as far as that's concerned. I've touched on the geographical challenges as well when you're looking about market access. The fact that Malaysia is not just Peninsular Malaysia, but you've got East Malaysia, which is huge, Sabah and Sarawak. But again, that's logistic issues that you need to take into account, and the infrastructure disparity that comes into play when you're actually dealing with different states, different areas, whether it's a large city or a smaller area. And again, if you get advice on that, usually those issues can actually be resolved. Perhaps you might need to do a hub and spoke sort of situation if you're in distribution, for example. Another area that you need to consider when you're going into the Malaysian market is actually the presence of Singaporeans, for example, already doing business there. Japan has been a large player in Malaysia for a time, and Chinese companies as well have been strong players within the Malaysian market. That doesn't mean that Canberra-based businesses can't go in. It just means that you need to think about who your potential competitors are and what sort of advantages you have over them. Solutions to these issues leverage on the fact that you do have the Malaysia-Australia Free Trade Agreement. So that gives you depth as far as accessibility. 99% of Australian goods to Malaysia are now tariff-free, and breadth to ASEAN with the RCEP. And if you look up these trade agreements, you can see what are the advantages that you gain from there. You should also engage with, on the Malaysian side, the Malaysia-Australia Business Council, or over here, if you're based in Canberra, you can actually engage with us. Austrade, the Malaysian HiCom, Matrade, there's lots of resources. Canberra Business Chamber, which will be able to also guide you through all these sort of nuances as far as who do you speak to if you need more help in particular areas. One area that has come up a little bit in discussion is the impact of the new sales and service tax on luxury items in Malaysia. That doesn't directly impact the tariff status. All of that still remains, but it does actually impact people's potential buying power because of the additional tax, sales and service tax in Malaysia for certain premium goods, for example, on wines or the more expensive cheeses. So if you are thinking of something along those lines where it's luxury goods, it doesn't mean that you don't go into the market. You just need to think how these changes actually affect you and how you can actually get around them. Maybe think about your pricing strategy, think about local finishing or value adds in Malaysia to mitigate some of these tax impacts. The next point I would like to bring up would be actually investing in cultural training and actually talking to Malaysians in Canberra and get an insight of what it's like to do business in Malaysia. And there are quite a few Malaysians actually based in Canberra that be able to help you with that. Understanding some of the nuances and differences in language that I talked about, saying something may have a different meaning when you're looking at it from an Australian or Malaysian perspective. And you should also consider potentially engaging local partners in Malaysia to navigate regulatory requirements or going into business with them, whether it's through distribution agreement, joint ventures, or licensing. There are, of course, pros and cons with each and every one of these options, and you would need to seek advice on it. And in any relationship, make sure you have it clearly documented and your IPs and rights are well documented as well. One thing that you can actually utilize to actually soften your entry into Malaysia is using digital platforms to make that first entry, because that's a low risk entry strategy. And Malaysia has a very high digital adoption rate, and buying things online is almost a norm. You'd see people getting packages almost daily, I would say, for nearly everything, right down to groceries. So you might want to actually see how digital marketing can build your brand awareness before you actually push forward your physical presence, if that is something that is actually applicable to your business. So when you want to build long-term partnerships in Malaysia, you should look at building relationship business culture. You should have a bit of patience in negotiating because it is more relational and not so transactional. Like any other business venture, going into Malaysia needs to be looked at as a long-term presence venture, and that's where you're going to get the most benefit out of it. It's important to have those face-to-face meetings where possible to build that relationship, understanding the cultural nuances and respecting hierarchy and decision-making processes is very strong and something that needs to be taken in account in any Asian culture, I would say. I've already touched on the SST issue, so I won't spend too much time on this. And what can AMBC do in helping you with your expansion into Malaysia? We can help with potentially business matching and introduction. If you come to us and tell us what you need, we can see how we can actually link you up. As and when we are able, there are networking events and trade missions. I believe the ACT government and the Canberra Business Chamber has also organized trips like that before. So that's potentially an avenue. And cultural and business guidance is something that we can give you so that you have some idea of what it's like to engage in Malaysia. Market intelligence and insight, you can get a lot of data online, yes, but sometimes talking to people involved in that given industry on the ground makes a world of difference because it gives you that local nuances, and that leads back to, again, the business matching and introductions. And we are also able to put you in touch with the relevant government bodies and entities should you need a deal with them. And through our connections, we will also be able to put you in touch with the right legal and regulatory experts should you need those aspects of help as well. And that's the end of my slide presentation.
Thank you very much, Kushwant. That's a really good overview of some of the basics, I think, of doing business in Malaysia. I really appreciate the insight you've offered us. And at this point, I'd like to turn to Dayalan Asoka, the founder and CEO of Proventus, who is going to talk about his journey and experience in entering the Malaysian market. Going to talk about executing an entry to the market from planning to first shipment and challenges in execution. So Dayalan, I'll hand over to you. And as I say, we will have time for questions at the end.
Thanks there, Greg. Thanks also to Kate and Kush for bringing me to this conversation. It was great to listen to everyone. Kush, Mr. Abdul Latif, I think was pretty enlightening to hear your aspects and your perspectives. Right. So let me share my screen quickly.
And I should say, just while Dayalan is sharing his screen, he's beaming to us live from Malaysia. So it's very exciting to have some direct on-the-ground presence there for our webinar today.
Yep, that's right. So, right, I assume you can see my screen there, Greg?
Yep, that's perfect.
Okay, cool. To kick off, I'm just representing Proventus Group, which is actually based in Canberra, and very happy to, after this, if you've got any questions or discussions you'd like to have, we can kick off and proceed with helping you guys get across, especially in this instance, to moving your business to Malaysia or having a presence in Malaysia. So Proventus, our expertise is in process optimization, product development, low-cost countries set up and manufacturing. This means the whole supply chain and involving more than one country often. Quality management systems that help you do that in a very efficient way, in a very process-driven way, in order for you to be able to, sustain the operations. So another element of our operation is also product cybersecurity and functional safety, which are all elements of developing a product that is very solution-driven and targeted to the markets that you're looking to enter. So today I'm here to talk about entering Malaysian operations, insights and lessons learned from the ground. So this means, what it takes to enter like a manufacturing type operation into Malaysia and what the benefits are, and how Malaysia stacks up against all the other countries in the region. I'll be covering those four different aspects in this discussion. Now, I'd like to set the scene and give you one example of a real-world scenario that I've navigated. So running multiple injection molding paths in a country, 30 odd part numbers, in a remote part of a country that which is not Malaysia. With this partner that we've been with for a while, which we inherited, quality has been on a slippery slope for months. Delivery is impacted, and customers are very frustrated. After multiple rounds of CAPAs, which are corrective and preventive actions, we decided to quit this partner. Prior to pushing that button, I inquired regarding this supplier and found out that recently back then, a very large pharmaceutical company from the UK had quit this vendor. However, their tools were held at ransom. Their customer found it almost impossible to retrieve their tools and were going through a very difficult time. You can imagine if you had all your tools at one vendor and you were depending on them for your business, and if they were taking a stance like this, that puts you in quite deep trouble. So before pushing that button, which is to quit that supplier, I had to craft a plan to exit the supplier without causing business disruption, of course. This involved creating a buffer of stock, going on site to negotiate directly with their directors, incentivizing the move. And I can tell you this was quite a tough one in that country. And they had a very rough way of dealing with things like this, and they weren't expecting us to exit or quit. Pre-qualifying, part of that, a new vendor in order to be able to transfer the tools across and make the move seamless. As I said, we don't want any business disruption. However, the big variable here is how this party would react in light of this news. This is a real situation that can be avoided if you have a solid sourcing and vendor selection process, not just one that's focused on commercials. I believe some of you just before have touched on this. Also, more importantly, this situation can be avoided if you choose countries with strong IP protection and a strong judiciary as well. Of course, this is not given. It's not the case for everyone, and it's not going to happen all the time. However, these are risks that you should be aware of before you select a partner or choose a country to build up your presence in. In Malaysia, I think Kush touched on this a little bit. Relationships matter. People are typically warm, respectful, community-oriented, and with quite deep cultural richness. This is because of the multiracial and multi-ethnic community that Malaysia is. Tolerance and multilingualism is everywhere. Everyone speaks more than one language, at least more than two languages at a minimum. And also largely most people speak English. And that's one of the key reasons in the past I've moved quite a few businesses to Malaysia in the EMS and contract manufacturing space. In the more industrialized states, there is a very strong sense and pride in their craftsmanship. So if you've got engineering folks, quality folks, process folks, business, commercial folks, they're all very proud of their work, and they do a really good job at it because they often have a very long standing tenure at most of their roles and in the companies. I'll touch a bit about this in a minute. Why Malaysia? Also talking a little bit about the export side of things. I think this was also touched on before, so I don't want to elaborate too much on that. 58% of the world's population lives in Asia. Malaysia is a great launchpad into Asia. As speakers prior have touched on, Malaysia has got great free trade agreements and arrangements within the region. And so it's a brilliant launchpad, being one of the better countries in the region to launch a business into. Very stable infrastructure. That's another key point I think that I should highlight. There are no, back in the day, I've been traveling to China since the early 2000s. So I've been to China 50, 60 times, for example. Often in the big cities, you hear about power cuts and what do you call issues with logistics. None of those kinds of things happen in Malaysia. Power is stable. All of the resources are stable. Factories are able to operate 24/7, largely with no interruption. A big population of the folks on the ground speak English, if not too much, at least a little. They would be able to understand you. If you're translating something technical, they would clearly get it, and they'd be able to execute quite well. And this has been a key point of transferring quite a bit of business from other non-English speaking countries into Malaysia, because we found our engineers were able to access the operators on the ground and speak to them directly without having to have, like a translator there, and lots is lost in translation. Malaysia is obviously very investor friendly, as you've heard from the government reps that are on the call today as well. The free industrial zones and the licensed manufacturing warehouse schemes are all very useful if you're, depending on the type of business you're trying to do. If you're trying to get a export only business, then the FIZ works very well. If you're looking for a mix, then the LMW works better for you. However, there are already saying is there are multiple options for you to consider, and Malaysia really incentivizes bringing your business to the country, and they look after you quite well. As I just touched on before, relatively long tenures for factory workers and operations folks, even in logistics. People don't, like for example, in other countries, sometimes after like the new year, they jump ship and move to another factory looking for greener pastures. Largely in Malaysia, that's not the case. People are, I've also worked in factories in Malaysia at a management level, and I found that we're giving 25-year, 30-year, 15-year awards to many people that actually stay on and make it a career, a lifetime career choice. Strong IP protection and judiciary, that's a really important point in that example that I shared with you. That sort of thing is a bit harder to do in Malaysia, and it's rarely seen, if not heard of such a thing. But in some other countries, it's quite in my experience, it's quite a common occurrence. The last one was, with regards to RCEP, the cumulative origin rule applies. That means if you've got components coming in from other countries, assembling it in Malaysia, and you sell it to another, let's say Japan, then you still qualify under the RCEP origin rules. A quick regional comparison for operational accessibility. This takes into account ease of setup, regulatory simplicity, quality of infrastructure, as I touched on before, readiness of labor, and also quality of labor, cost competitiveness, and the overall number. Singapore and Malaysia are right up on the top. However, you would find that numerically they are similar. However, you'd find that the cost competitiveness in Malaysia is at a much higher number than it is in Singapore. So if you're looking to set up operations in Malaysia, then you are advantaged by the exchange rate as well. Many of the operations in Singapore that I've been involved with have all moved across the border into JB, which is Johor Bahru, and set up the operations in Johor Bahru, largely for this reason as well. So from planning to first shipment, how do you execute getting your product or your service across into Malaysia? You'd have a solid development process, regardless, product or service, and that would then handshake with your procurement process. And you would go through several steps before you end up in Malaysia or any other country for that matter. You would first have pretty strong requirements. You would have a freeze of requirements, and have a baseline that you're working with. From that, depending on the type of product, some products we've actually sourced a partner earlier on instead of at the end, primarily to understand the capabilities in the industry, the technological limitations, for example, and actually design your product to meet those requirements in order for you to be able to launch a product successfully without having too many teething issues due to technology limitations. You would start with your design being frozen. You would go through and shortlist or maybe a long list of partners that you want to partner with. You would do your due diligence. I think Kush pointed out it's really important that you're on site. You have a reliable partner. You would audit the site at the next phase and ensure that they are, like in any arrangement, are who they say they are and have the capability. Sometimes a lot is lost in presentations. The nuances that are really, really important to you might not be as important to them. So it's really important to be on site to verify those claims and the capability. In finding your partners or contract manufacturers or service providers, there are multiple official directories you could refer to, MIDA, Martrade. But also, I think what I found really important is referrals. Referrals in relevant industries give you a much more a higher level of confidence in terms of the capability of the partners that you're looking to work with. You move on to an RFQ stage. You do initial evaluations. You sign an NDA to protect your IP, and Malaysia's got great IP protection laws, and you'd be well informed to do that. Move on to site visits, perform technical audits, ensure their capability meets your requirements, ensure that all of your EHS and corporate responsibility requirements are all met. You qualify them, you sign a contract, you kick off tooling, you perform trials, you ramp slowly, you ramp in a measured way, and ensure that the ramp is actually based on data, and it's actually tracking towards the direction that you want, and then you kick off volume. Now, some of the pitfalls that we've navigated in the past is gaps in supplier's capability, or there are nuances, as I just mentioned before, that they're not ready. So you'd have to skill them up. And there, one great trait in Malaysia I found is they are more than willing to learn. And if you're willing to train them, they're more than willing to learn. They're more than willing to use their training departments to sort of propagate your training and your knowledge. And it's a really, really great sort of continual learning environment. And they're very happy to be trained and upskilled, because obviously it adds to their value as well as individuals and as a company. Often in the past, when I've actually upskilled manufacturers to automotive standard, which is TS 16949, or any other standard, for example, medical device 13485, you would find that they then we've opened their what you call market up to actually access these other sort of more regulated markets. Technology transfer gaps causing product delays. So this is why it's really, really important to have a process-driven approach to transferring your product skills or your services across. And you want to ensure that you've actually dotted every I and crossed every T, and have a very strong validation process to ensure that what you intend is actually what you achieve. And I've seen obviously times when that was not done, and what was achieved is actually more trouble and a lot of headaches, and not what we initially intended or set out to do. And one really important element, I believe Kush also touched on this, is you must have a really stringent partner selection process. You need to know what you're doing. You need to know who you're talking to. You need to be able to tell the wood from the trees, because there are things to look out for anywhere, any country. I've been in sourcing and vendor management and the rest in Asia for quite a while. You should be able to, you should rely or have a really good partner that can help you navigate those conversations and navigate those problems, actually land with someone good, a partner that's good, but also have experience with in the past. They'll be even better. Some of the lessons for long-term success is, pick the right export structure. What sort of business are you looking to set up? Are you looking to export everything? Are you looking to access the local market? Then you sort of pick the regional locations that fit your requirements. Make sure you prioritize quality and efficiency from the get-go. This is really important. Then you scale quality and you scale your efficiency. If you don't do that, then you end up scaling your problems and you scale your inefficiencies. And at scale, that actually creates a massive issue. Maintain on-ground presence. Make sure you've got local presence that understands the business, understands technically what actually is required. Because one of the things we found is often guidance is required, especially when they've got overseas customers that are providing requirements, especially technical requirements. They look up to them to get technical guidance, and they might be, I think this is probably a bit of a cultural nuance. They might be shy to take a big decision without support from their customers, for example. So I think it's really important to have local presence so things can be, decisions can be made on the fly. Review your cost yearly. All of these arrangements change, and you need to ensure that you're well prepared to navigate those changes. Final thought, export success isn't just about market access, right? And as I said, it's not just the commercials as well. It's about building a repeatable, risk-managed operation on the ground, which then obviously results in commercial success. If you've got any questions or would like to discuss further about, taking your business into Asia, Malaysia especially, please reach out to us and we can be more than happy to have a quick chat. Thanks very much. Greg, back to you.
Thank you very much, Dale. And that was really interesting to hear about your experiences. Now, if I could just ask our panelists to rejoin us on the screen there, and I'll just ask our attendees. I've just launched a feedback poll that you should be able to see on the side there. We're just really keen to get any feedback on that. So it's entirely confidential, but if you could just take a moment to give us some feedback on how you found the webinar today, that would be really great. Now, Abu and Abdul, are you still with us as well? If you are, perhaps come back, please, to the screen, and we'll just take any questions that are coming in. So please do drop them in the Q&A function if you have.
I think I'm unable to switch on my video because it mentions here that you cannot start your video because the host has stopped it.
All right, I'll try and sort that out. So apologies for that. But while we are,
Same to me too.
I might just come to a question for all of you. What's one common mistake that Australian businesses make when entering or trying to enter the Australian market?
I might just jump in on that front, being still hot on the trails of what I just spoke about. I think you know, I would say Australian or not, largely many foreign entities entering Malaysia. For example, I worked for a German entity that actually entered Malaysia once, actually entered all of Asia. This is just not just Malaysia, but entered all of Asia, and got burnt and left, right? So the mistakes they sort of shared with me that they made was this. One of the things that I touched on before is having that local presence, not understanding the cultural nuances, expecting everything to just go as planned. That's normally not the case. It's never the case anyway, but is even more not the case when you're interacting between multiple countries in Asia. If you know, especially if you're buying components from one country, assembling another, and selling to another, then there are lots of moving parts. You need to ensure that you've got local presence, being able to navigate the problems as they come, but also imparting your standard of what you expect on an ongoing basis. That really helps them also craft. Once they craft it and they're on track to deliver, then they're good to go. But until the time that they're ready, you'd find that it might not be what you expect. And if you just wait for a while before you show up, then you might be in for a surprise. So that's a lesson that I sort of took to heart from answering your question. Just
Abdul, from your point of view, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think another thing is I think most of it covered by Dylan, but that's another thing that important is to find the right, for example, right partners and right distributor. And also right now, our government, we're really getting companies that to be very serious in the ESG component, governance, and as well as some environmental friendly, as well as labor. In terms of labor, some come to Malaysia and they expect us to get some cheap manufacturing costs and to get, they are not treating the labor as it should be, right? So now we are moving forward and getting on. We always get all our market members, for example, Malaysian exporters or manufacturing in Malaysia, to compile to be compliant with international standards.
So that's a really important point, that if we have got businesses going to do business in Malaysia, there is an expectation that we're meeting good international standards in terms of labor rules and so forth. Kush, I just wonder, from your point of view, is there anything to add? And perhaps picking up on that point about partnerships, if you're looking for the right partner, how do you go about finding that business?
Well, I think if you notice from all the speakers, there's a recurring theme of doing your due diligence and choosing the right partners. And that very much involves actually engaging the people that can help them out with that. For example, Martrade, the Canberra Business Chamber for Canberra-based businesses, getting in touch with AMBC so that we can actually put them in touch with the right people, or companies like Thailand's company, Proventus, where they actually have the expertise and people on the ground. And like Thailand, I've seen personally situations where there is an expectation that things are going to go a certain way because you're going in with an Australian mindset of how things are done, and it doesn't quite play out on the ground. For example, we've helped in franchise arrangements, and I've pointed out that, look, even a 10% variance in the way things are done can make an enormous difference in how it plays out. If you don't understand the supply chain differences and the regulatory requirements, for example, or as Abdul Latif has pointed out, engaging with the right partners, signing on too quickly, and then not being able to get out of that arrangement.
Okay, thank you. Now, obviously, 2025, a big year for Malaysia as chair of ASEAN. Abdul or Abu, did you want to comment on that? What's the impact of chairing ASEAN for Malaysia and for businesses wanting to cooperate there?
Maybe I'll let Mr. Abu, you have anything to say on this one?
Maybe Abdul Latif can mention on the economic side, and then I'll top up.
Okay, actually, there are many things that have been lined up, especially to October. We have some business event in conjunction with the summit that we are gathering all the business people from ASEAN, because we have also discussion with ASEAN partners during the event. So this is where all the business people can seek opportunity to network and to explore more. And of course, Malaysia as chairman, we also would like to make Malaysia as the entry point. And of course, for Australia, logistical wise, it's much better to have a business with Southeast Asian countries in logistical factor. And of course, this trade war ongoing, people are very, very cautious about who they are dealing with. So I think this is a very good time for people to come and do business with Southeast Asian country, particularly. We are not lack of expertise. We are always competitive, and Southeast Asia is very large economy, with very large population, a lot of opportunities here. Yeah, that's all for me.
All right, well, thank you.
Thank you, Abdul Latif. Greg, maybe if I can add some more points to it, if I
Sure.
may.
Yes,
All right,
please.
thank you very much. Malaysia has long-standing close ties with Australia, including shared membership in the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership (CSP) that we enjoy, and regional trade agreements such as the CPTPP, RCEP, AANZ, FTA, make it an ideal bridge country for deeper economic integration. Hence, Malaysia as ASEAN chair this year, has used its position to highlight ASEAN's collective potential while offering diplomatic assurances that appeal to Australian investors. The relatively stable political status within the ASEAN attracts more confidence, especially with regards to Australian companies and investors to look at ASEAN. And this is also echoing the Nicholas Moore report, which was, introduced in the 2023, 2023, yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Now, look, we're bang on the end of our webinar now at 3 o'clock. I just wondered if people do want to find out a little bit more about that ASEAN summit coming up in November, where do they go? To the ASEAN website, is that correct?
Yes,
Yeah.
you can find it at the website.
Fantastic. All right. Well, we'll connect people up with that at ASEAN.org. So if anyone does want any more information, pop along there, and everything you need to know will be there. So look, we've come to the end of our time together. So I really do want to thank our amazing panelists, Ms. Iliamera Sulaiman from the High Commission of Malaysia, Mr. Abu Hirzan from the High Commission of Malaysia, Mr. Abdul Latif Nordin, the Assistant Trade Commissioner for the Malaysian Trade Development Commission from Melbourne, Mr. Kushwant Danoa, the Chair of the Australia-Malaysia Business Council, and Mr. Dayalan Asoka, the Chief Executive of Proventus, who has joined us from Malaysia. It's been great having you here on the podcast, or on the webinar, I should say, with us today. If you do want any more information, or you want to see a replay of this, you'll be able to find it on our website at canberrabusiness.com. We've got a whole set of really good and useful information for exporters from Australia. So do check that out at canberrabusiness.com. I hope this was useful. This was brought to you by the Canberra Business Chamber with the support of the ACT government. Thank you very much for joining us, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.